Welcome to That Hoquiam Podcast, the podcast where we talk about what's going on in the city of Hoquiam. My name is Stephen Pavogel, and I'll be your host. I'm a member of the Hoquiam City Council and currently the council president. We're going to have fun, so sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, and let's chat. Thank you for joining me. Here we are on the very first episode of That Hoquiam Podcast. This is kind of just an opportunity for me to kind of share what's going on and what I learn around the city, talk to different folks to kind of just keep you up to date on what's going on. I should make a disclaimer right from the very top that this is me, Stephen Pavogel, putting this together, and any opinions or commentary that's made or is that of either myself or the guests or whatnot, and does not necessarily reflect an official position of the city of Hoquiam. So please bear that in mind as you hear this. Another thing is, because this isn't a city thing, I'm not using taxpayer funds or any resources to put this on. So don't think that this is kind of some waste of time. This is just people trying to, share what we know. I'm recording this in, early April of 2020. So it's a very strange world, and any way that we have to communicate with each other is kind of a good thing. So I'm really excited for this first one. I have an interview with the mayor of Hoquiam, Ben Winkelman, and we just kind of talk about what's going on. And it was a really good conversation, and I think you might enjoy it. I don't know how often I'm going to put those out. We'll put these out. We'll see how it goes. But I hope to make it available in any which way that you get your podcasts, whether it be through Apple or Google or some other podcast service. Spreaker is another. And then hopefully I'll load something to YouTube, although it may not have video. This one won't have video, but maybe that's to come once I get a little bit more used to all of this. So welcome, thank you, and here is an interview with the mayor, Ben Winkelman. Welcome to my guest here, the mayor of Hoquiam, Ben Winkelman. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, thanks, Stephen.
Good. So I was thinking that it'd be a really good opportunity to, just kind of chat with people in Hoquiam, and a podcast is a good way to do it. And I thought that a very natural first choice would be the mayor. So thank you. Now, I'm recording this, and tonight it is April 7th, 2020. So we are, I don't know how many weeks into the global pandemic of the COVID-19, and we've gone through a lot of things. So if you're listening to this, years into the future, it's either going to be a really interesting historical artifact or very, very dated. But there's a lot of stuff going. It's going to, hopefully it'll be like, hey, remember that time?
Yeah.
But there is some things going on in town, and people are, kind of concerned about how things are going. Of course, people are concerned in general about kind of the economy that we're suddenly facing and the health risks. But, maybe we can talk about some of the things that people are concerned about. It's funny to, let's get on a podcast and talk about parking, but
Well, it's been a big concern lately, and it's odd because, things, you mentioned the date, you should almost mention the hour, because things have been changing so quickly, and whether it's advances in science and technology, where I think, a month ago, most of us, as Americans, you might say, would say, oh, well, somebody else is taking care of that. Somebody else is the scientist, and they're manufacturing these products, and I guess we're kind of good consumers. And now everybody wants to know, what's the solution going to be? And there's different science methods on so many different fronts that things change by the hour, maybe the minute sometimes. And so when we started this, some few weeks ago, I declared an emergency, and I think thankfully, so we kind of in Hoquiam declared the first city emergency in Grace Harbor County, and everything changed, just but a few hours after doing so. The governor had their perspective, and then national government has their perspective, and then the doctors started weighing in from different sides of the story. And slowly we had to start making changes socially, and it was really odd for me as a new mayor to do that without the ability to have our meetings to address pretty significant decisions with the city council. And with having you as a council president, in the event I'm not available, then you're up to bat. And
yeah, I'm suddenly very really aware of that. I was like, wait a minute. Well, he's healthy, right? So.
Yeah, it has been strange, and I'm looking forward to us being able to have at least our first kind of virtual council meeting coming up, and some of the things that people feel like are emergencies, as you mentioned, parking became one, or at least it seemed to be. 72-hour parking rule in the city of Hoquiam has not really been the front line story, but it is now. And I guess the council's going to talk about that at our next meeting. But you and I kind of dug into some of the complaints of, that were kind of being out there on social media. And I think we found that there wasn't as significant as an issue as it first appeared, but I know why people are worried. They've right now nobody knows where their income's going to come from, and they don't want to be incurring, bills and tickets and things like that. So.
Yeah, can we just back up a little bit, just in case somebody doesn't know the background on this? So, and just in case they haven't seen this on social media,
sure.
So we have a code here in Hoquiam that says that you can't leave your car parked on the street for more than 72 hours without moving it, right?
Right.
And then, so what's kind of happened is there's been a little bit of enforcement, and it turns out it is really just a little bit of enforcement, but that's not kind of how we were kind of hearing it of that, which, going back to right now, we're under this kind of stay home, stay healthy directive from really the state, which we are certainly wanting to honor here in Hoquiam, trying to keep as much social distancing as we can. And so people didn't necessarily have a reason to move their car, right? They weren't going to work, that kind of thing.
Right.
But the background of this, why we have this, is otherwise people abandon vehicles on the street. And so, you get tired of a car being stuck in front, parked in front of your house for, months at a time, and you can't do anything about it. So we have that 72-hour parking. And so that has been enforced in a few instances. And didn't we determine that it was something like, it was like 2 or 3?
Since March 23rd, and you and I, went straight to the source. We need to find out what enforcement's doing, and since March 23rd, which was when the governor issued his, I guess it's a declaration, or to stay at home, stay healthy declaration. We had 3 incidents, and boy, when I was watching kind of on social media what was going on, you would think that there may have been hundreds. And I really I was at first pretty concerned, like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
But really, when everybody's at home and they're paying attention to what their neighbors are doing, I think we also started fielding a lot of complaints. And
Right.
most of that code enforcement stuff and citations is a response to complaints. That it's
Right.
not necessarily every car that's being complained about, but if somebody calls in a complaint about one vehicle and the code enforcement's there, they're going to look at everybody else that's parked there. And I think more citations come from illegal parking, on the curbs or facing the wrong direction and things like that, much more often than a 72-hour parking, or even just having an abandoned vehicle that doesn't have current tabs and license.
Right.
And I think
Right.
those definitions are all old and an old code that, like you mentioned, it has its place. And I think people just felt like, it shouldn't be enforced right now. And it was just one of the things that wasn't in the forefront of my mind when I was, trying to figure out what building hours we were going to have and who the critical or essential workers were. And,
Right.
we addressed a lot of other things, but that's one that we
Sure.
just didn't really talk about.
Yeah. You mentioned, so our last council meeting would have been on, so I want to say like March 9th, right? So that's before we officially went into a declaration. We had a meeting scheduled for the 23rd, and that was canceled out of really not being able to really feasibly do it
Right.
under the current circumstances. But now we have technology going out to all the city council members. I don't know if they all have it in their hands today, but I know a few of us do, that will allow. So this was previously budgeted. This was a thing that we really wanted to do to save on cost for the city in the long term, and not produce a bunch of materials unnecessarily. And it was something that I think we'd planned to do last year and just kind of got put off.
Right.
And then before this even broke out, we said we need to do this. It's time, and then it really became time. We probably would have had them in our hands at this point, regardless. But now it was a little bit more urgent.
Yeah, thankfully, that decision had already been made, although it wasn't extremely expensive. When we have a council of 12 to get everybody tablets and then get them set up, security wise, they were set up as business iPads so that in the event of loss or theft, they could be wiped clean. And so that took us an extra 5 days, and it ended up taking a while to get those. But yeah, my understanding is that some of them are out to the council people today, and probably by tomorrow we'll have them all delivered.
Yeah, very good. So that means that on next Monday, as we're talking, so it might be in the past for people listening, but on what is that, April 13th, we will have a meeting on Zoom, and
right.
so the public will be able to join that meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, they will. One of the things that I'll be talking to legal counsel about tomorrow, that's Steve Johnson right now, and we're trying to address the Open Public Meeting Act and making sure that we are complying with state law. And while there's been some removal of restrictions and things like that, we were going to try our best, regardless of whether or not the law requires it, to inform the public when they can participate. Since making a decision that Zoom would be a good platform, there's been a lot of security risks and issues that people have identified. I think you're going to find that with almost any platform. And so hopefully with a little bit of training and some passwords and things that might be a little challenging the first time through, I think, overall it will probably be something that we can address, at least at the city level. I don't think we'll have hundreds or thousands of people trying to participate. And so, if we have a little bit more than usual, I think that would be good. And in the past, we've always had a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting that would allow people to comment on agenda items, and then at the end of the meeting, another opportunity to discuss, any item, and there's a time limitation. And so we're going to try to figure out the best way to host that and make it work. This first meeting, we'll waive that requirement or procedure at either the beginning or the end of the meeting. I'm not sure which, but I think it might be a good idea to put it off till the end of the meeting on this first one, and then we'll see how it goes. And it's going to be different, but everything's different right now.
Yeah, for sure. So we're probably going to have an agenda out by
Friday.
the end of the week.
Friday at noon is what I was told. That's our target.
Okay, and that'll have information so that the public can have, it'll be like a Zoom meeting ID that they can go and be able to log into that. So that's fantastic. And then but then there is an opportunity for people to provide comment, just not necessarily in the meeting, and that's they can email their council members in advance if they see something on that agenda.
Yeah, I sure hope that they will. I know the council. I can just imagine as a council person, having been on the council for 12 years, that you want to help, you want to do something. You're representing your all your constituents and the rest of the city, and I'm just hoping that this is going to be a good opportunity for us to establish some sort of pattern that will get us through at least this stay home, stay healthy thing. And for some who are in homes that have people that are higher risk, they may find a method to continue to participate through this platform, for some time period until it seems to be a little bit safer to gather in large groups. And so it'll be interesting to see how that works. And we've all been participating, I think, in various platforms and meetings almost every day. And
for sure,
I think that's what we're going to be doing now.
Yeah, I think before this happened, I think I was one of the few people that had ever been on a Zoom meeting before. Most people had never even heard of it. Really, right. a month ago, probably like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, didn't they have like a 10,000% increase in users or something like that?
Oh, at least, yeah. It's pretty, it's pretty big. And then actually, that was one of the first meetings with this to do remotely. That I had to make sure was set up on my computer was so that my son, who's on the Hoquiam school board, so he could get into his Zoom meeting for the school board. So the school board's been using that and will continue to use that.
Seems like most of the school, like the teachers and stuff that have set up their online access, I don't think they Zoom with any students, maybe leadership students or something like that. But I know the teachers themselves, the administration, they're having their Zoom conferences and setting up. I think their work maybe goes through Google, like Google Hangouts, because all of the students have a Google ID.
Yeah, the Google Classroom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I know also with the YMCA, we're getting ready to have actually, I think they had the first high school leaders meeting on Zoom tonight, and then we're going to start doing youth and government on Zoom starting next week. So that's going to be kind of exciting, kind of getting kids reconnecting back into routine a little bit as they've had their school year stolen from them as far as being in person. I really feel for the seniors that, there will be a prom of some sort, but I really feel bad for them. I think back to, I had some really good friends in high school that the last time I saw them was graduation night. And, to not have that build up to get to graduation night, it's like,
their last time they saw them may have been, a month ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I hope that's not the case. And I know that the superintendent here and I'm sure the school board is working really diligently on trying to figure out a way to make this year special. It's already going to be special in its own
for
way.
sure.
Everyone will remember the class of 2020,
Oh yeah, for sure.
for so many different reasons. But I know that, even weeks ago when the school was talking about the fact that they might be closing and sending students home to learn, it was a question mark of, how can the city work with the school district? And, you know, there are a lot of really positive things that are happening right now too. And I think, you know, as anything that's challenging to society, you're always stronger and better when you come out the other side of it. And it's honestly, it's kind of breathtaking and beautiful at times to see what people in our community are doing for each other. And the problem solving is just, it takes me like back before I was born. I just keep thinking of like the Industrial Revolution, and like here we are, like all of a sudden science and technology and thinking out of the box and being a problem solver is just like the most important thing. And it's been a long time since our society's been like that. So it's hard to keep that perspective, but I keep trying to kind of myself go back to that and think, okay, let's look at all the awesome things that are happening right now, and let's try and concentrate on that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to hit on real quick. So our parks are all closed, obviously, as with emergency order. And for some really good reason, so that kids aren't playing on the playground. You can play on the playground by yourself, but then another kid's going to play on the playground and that kind of thing.
Right.
But people can go outside, right? They can walk. They can go.
Yeah, they really should. They really should. I think it's hard for all of us though when you see your friend, and I found myself doing this a few times. I've gone out and I work down on the waterfront, and so I'll leave my office and I'm going to go for a walk. And you see somebody else and they're walking their dog and they're by themselves. It's really hard to continue to remind yourself to step back and keep stepping back, because everybody's kind of got that comfort bubble, and it has to be so much bigger now. It's odd for me. I'm kind of one of those, like, I don't know, some people probably think I stand too close to them every day. And so now it's kind of stay away. And it is hard. And I think a few weeks ago honestly, maybe it was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we kind of added to the declaration of emergency in Hoquiam. I added that the city parks that had playgrounds were going to be closed. And, that was a difficult decision at first until I saw so many people, with their little kids, and they're down at the park. And in many cases, when the school was closed, it's grandma and grandpa, and they're down there at the park. And, it's hard to go to a playground when there's 30 kids and not be close together. And right. I don't think anybody was down there with, bad intentions, obviously, but, I don't like taking anybody's rights to do anything they want to away. And, thankfully most people here are law abiding and kind of listen to that recommendation. And I don't think we've had any problems or any need for law enforcement to get involved or anything like that. So it's been good. It's just unfortunate, especially now when the weather's nice again. It's like, I'm sure people would like to be down playing at the park, and but they can still do that. They can still go. There's lots of places just walking down the street.
Right.
There are places to go. Just try not to gather. It's hard.
Yeah. So, but all the city parks are closed, right? That includes like Elton Bennett and all that kind of stuff, right? Just to be sure. That's actually a good question, and one that I'll bring up with the department heads at our meeting tomorrow, because
the declaration, the way that it was written, and my intent at the time was just to close the parks that had playgrounds in them, because that's where we were having the problems.
Right.
I did notice that the signage that was put together and posted at most parks just say all this city park is closed, or all city parks are closed. And I don't recall if there's one like at Elton Bennett Park or at the a lot of places, I guess, that people
like
consider
cemetery.
city parks. Yeah, those aren't not closed. And so the intent at least was just the parks that had playgrounds, and we talked about trying to just mark the playground off. But obviously, if you're at the park and then your kids want to go on the playground,
right. And then you have the picnic shelter, and then the basketball court, and all of those other.
And
things,
we tried to not do that, for as long as we could, and it was almost
the current state order doesn't allow that anyway. You can't.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't play pickup basketball under the
current
state order.
It seemed like every time I made a declaration, later that day or the next day, the governor would have a similar thing, and so I think we've sort of stayed on the same page.
Yeah.
It was really concerning when there were so many people going out to the beaches, and that weekend.
Yeah.
I received, I'm going to say, at least 100 phone calls, text messages, or emails, or let's throw in social media messages as well. Like, couldn't I do something? And I just really didn't have a solution that made any sense. And honestly, people they weren't gathering here in Hoquiam, but they were definitely traveling through and kind of emptied out the grocery stores, and it was really frustrating for our citizens, I know, and myself included, kind of calling all the different council people, like, you guys have any ideas? What do you think we need to do here?
And,
right. We just kind of moved on and tried to deal with the things that we can control, because right now I think that lack of being able to control the people that are around you is frustrating for a lot of people, because we all have different opinions on what's safe and what's not. So I know it's really frustrating and causes a lot of anxiety for some people. And then being somewhat socially isolated it adds to, stress, anxiety, and depression for some people. And so it's hard to decide what to do, as a community to address this, just because it's a bigger challenge than we've had in a long time.
It's certainly something that very, very few people were around for the last time that this happened, and those that were very, very small and weren't really old enough to remember it. So it's this is new for everybody. So we are getting through. It's certainly a challenge. It's a different kind of challenge than I think most people really anticipated. We would ever have to go through. The isolation as the solution is really tough. We do have technology, which is kind of helpful, that we can still kind of reach out and connect with each other through technology that we didn't really have to the same degree a few years ago.
Right. If this were the Spanish flu, which I know over time there have been a few comparisons between COVID-19 and the Spanish flu. I just think to myself, you don't have the technology in medicine. You don't have the technology to communicate. And I could see where you'd almost be standing off in the street with people like, get away from me,
Right,
and so the technology is really good. At the same time, it also produces a little bit of panic in some people, because the news is immediately available. When we have another positive test result, half of the community knows within a couple of hours, it seems, where 100 years ago you'd have to read it in the newspaper.
Right.
So I don't know. There's been a lot of good things shared, coping strategies and things like that. I know our police chief and law enforcement, they're out there kind of exposing themselves to, the public and wanting to minimize contact, but to continue to have like community policing is really challenging. But yeah, they've shared, our police chief shared, at least among law enforcement, something from a PhD on behavioral response, basically to COVID-19, and talks about anxiety and depression and gives some good things about what to do. And I've heard people in our community using those coping strategies. And, one of his is like, stop watching TV news, because it sensationalizes so much of the negative coverage and infection counts and things like that, sometimes you get overwhelmed when all you hear is the negative conversation,
Right.
And so, trying to keep that positive mindset and set some goals for yourself that are, maybe they're not so high as your goals would ordinarily be, so that you can accomplish some of them and stop kind of isolating,
Right.
And so many people have just resigned to, they're like, no, I have to stay in my house. I'm never going to leave my house. And, they stay in bed and sleep for 12 hours a day. And, yeah, some of us need some extra sleep when you're stressed out, but you've got to be careful not to make that a pattern, especially when they stretch it out over, a month or two. So I don't know.
I'm trying really hard to, maintain my routine as much as possible.
Yeah,
And,
it's hard though.
It's not easy.
Yeah. And my kids, I've got 3 daughters, and they're, varying ages, one 8th grader and so I've got a 16-year-old that got her driver's license kind of on the last day that they were sort of open at the Department of Licensing, and she hasn't really gone anywhere because she's not supposed to. So, that's she's a super social person, and in state pageant with the Miss America thing, and they had their online, what they call spring forum, this weekend, and they were the first pageant program to have a virtual spring forum in the nation. And so that was it was definitely different. She dressed up in the living room, going through Zoom and talking about their platform and their interview outfits and all the different skills that they work on in the pageant program. And so it was interesting to be at the house and not at some hotel big conference center doing this pageant thing. So
yeah, I know working remotely has been very interesting for me, and I feel like suddenly, I don't know, I feel like I'm actually more productive. I have so much more work going on, that kind of thing, because I'm just, you don't have to walk across to somebody. You're just connecting instantly and stuff like that. And so it's oddly, it's not that you're doing less, you're probably doing more. And it's just this very strange new reality that's coming on really quickly.
Right. I thought about this the other night. I was thinking this is really similar to at least people kind of in our age group. I think when I was little, at home, video games was a new thing. When I was a little kid, it's like, oh, there's an Atari, and then we later had the Nintendo, and those home video games. It makes me think a little bit about how it feels for some people right now in society. And I was kind of thinking about this myself. Like sometimes, you have to hit the reset button, but you really don't want to. And I guess if you ever played Nintendo, the old school Nintendo, you might remember like sometimes the game would freeze and you'd have to, you did all this work to get so far in the game, and then it would freeze and you'd have to turn it off and like blow in the cartridge and then stick it back in there. And all your investment in your your video game, whether it's to get to that level or in your life, like to get to a certain goal, and all this work to set things up in your retirement account or your business, and then all of a sudden something that's out of your control takes it all away. And that frustration that you might feel as a little kid in a video game, all of a sudden it's like, wait, this is real life, and I cannot control the outcome. And that's where so much of that frustration comes from. But then again, we're all going to have a new game when we're done with this. So like, okay, that game that sucked. We're going to have a new system, and we're going to see what happens with the new system that we're all going to be living in. And sometimes things happen. You fall into the pit of alligators and you die, and you only have 6 more lives or whatever. But other times, hey, I found this great thing in this video game, and now I have an extra tool that I didn't have before and didn't even know existed. So I don't know. It was a weird analogy, but I started thinking like, we're living in a video game right now, like an old school Atari or something.
The great thing about this video game is we get to take on the boss together, right? So we've got a really bad boss to take on together, and we're not having to do it all on our own.
That's a great point, and pretty cool if you think about it. Like, what kind of video game is there where everybody gets to play if they want to?
Yeah, well, we want everybody to play. A few weak links can make this a lot harder game to play. So
yeah.
So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank you, Mayor Ben Winkelman, for chatting with us, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk real soon. Otherwise, we will have a city council meeting on April 13th, and that will be on Zoom, and the agenda will be out on the public on Friday, whatever Friday is, April
like 10th, I think.
10th, 10th, whatever Friday is. We'll have an agenda out with the Zoom link. So
thanks for putting together this podcast thing. I think it was a really good idea, and people either, like you said, they'll either be really interested or they won't. But I think getting information out to the public is it's good that people can get real information and know where it came from and ask questions. So please, and I know you've already been encouraging people to do this, but reach out to your council people. We've got 12 excellent council members, and all of the phones and emails and everything still work right now, at least most of them. I think maybe there's a couple that we're working on, but so thanks so much for putting this together, and I'm thinking we'll probably end up doing a few of these. So
yeah, probably a few. Yeah, we'll see. And maybe it'll go past crisis mode that we can keep talking to people.
Yeah, it's a good way to do it. And I'll be watching to see wherever you post this up. And so I can follow you, or I'm not sure how that's going to work, but
yeah. So I'm gonna probably put them on a YouTube channel for one. So and initially it won't have video, but just kind of the audio to some images so you can see what's going on.
Yeah.
And then I will get this to publish to all of the podcast platforms that I can. So Google Podcasts and Apple and Podcast Addict, and
cool.
Hopefully everywhere you can get a podcast, you'll be able to hear this when this is all done.
Well, I'm not really a podcast person, but I bet I'm gonna turn into one.
We'll find out. Yeah. Well, if this is what starts you down the hole of podcasts, there's some pretty fantastic ones out there.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, I have been on a podcast before, but I've never pursued that as a platform, but I know it's a good one. It's a really good one. So thanks, Stephen.
All right. Well, thank you. So that's it. That's the first episode of that Hoquiam podcast. I would like to thank Mayor Ben Winkelman for joining me tonight for that conversation. Just as a reminder, you can contact really any member of the city council through their email address. You can find those on the city's website, cityofhoquiam.com. You can email me on city business about what's going on in the city at spuvogel@cityofhoquiam.com. If you want to talk about the podcast, provide feedback, some ideas on what to do in the future, you can email Stephen@hoquiampodcast.com. That's really my specific thing. And so that way, keep the podcast email to the podcast and the city stuff to the city. And, we'll all get through this together and keep it all kind of neat and tidy. So you want to know when you're going to get the next episode of this? Well, you can subscribe on YouTube. I will do my best to get this out in a YouTube version. But if you are a podcast listener and you use pretty much any kind of podcast app, whether it be through Apple or Google or Podcast Addict or Spreaker or whatever, I'm going to do my best to get this on every platform possible. I think you might even be able to get your smart speaker to play this by asking it to play the latest episode of that Hoquiam podcast, and I think it should work from there. And I will do my best. Down the road, we might have some video with this, but mostly this is an audio experience. So once again, thank you for joining me, and I will see you around town eventually. Not right now, but we'll get through. All right. Stay home. Stay healthy. Thank you. Bye.